Perfect. Last few people that are joining now. So hello, thanks for joining. I think now's a good time for us to kick off. As always, we will be recording these sessions as well. So if you wanted to share this around with the rest of the team after the demo, then we will be sending this out later on today, I think, hopefully today or first thing tomorrow, and you'll have the recording to be able to share it around with the rest of the team. Any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll answer your questions as we go through. I'll do a Q&A section halfway through and then we'll do some more Q&As towards the end as well. But yeah, once again, thanks everyone for joining. So some of you may have heard of HandsHQ before, others it may be the very first time. But HandsHQ, we are a purpose-built software for the generation and management of RAMs. Essentially, we're working with businesses who realize that actually using Word and using Excel isn't the most efficient way of generating their documents. And they want to find an easier way to write RAMs, which first of all is going to save time, but ensure that a higher quality of documents and that sort of high quality is consistent throughout every document that's being created, regardless of who's doing it. So we wanted to make this system accessible for everyone. So whether you're a health and safety manager that's been writing RAMs for 30 years, or you're a site manager who's writing a RAMs document for the very first time, we want to make sure that everyone's got the ability to create those high quality documents every single time. So that's exactly what I'm going to show you today. So hopefully everyone should be able to see my screen is moving up and down at the moment, but this is HandsHQ. So HandsHQ is a cloud web-based system. So it essentially means that providing that you have an internet connection, you're always able to log into the system, write any RAMs, update any RAMs, sign off on them as well. So you're able to access through a multitude of different devices. So you could be on your desktop, laptop, or maybe out on site on a tablet. You can even sign off and read RAMs on your phone as well. So your risk assessment and method statement is essentially always in your pocket when you're out on site. So the first page that we log into when we jump onto the system is our sort of dashboard. This is our projects page where all of our risk assessments and method statements, our RAMs documents for different projects, different works will live. So we can see here our project name. We've got our different colored tabs on the left-hand side here. So anything green means that project is currently live. Anything yellow means that project has got a future start date. So RAMs that we've created for a job in 2-3 weeks time, been a little bit more proactive than maybe some are usually, rather than a last-minute RAMs document that's being created for the project that morning. So we've got our status, project name, client details, any reference numbers, when that document was last updated as well. As part of a feature, which is our risk register, where you're able to make updates to your risk assessments. It's going to tell us whether our risk assessments are up to date or not. We do also have an approval process too, which we can create to essentially create that internal approval process. So if it is a site manager writing RAMs, as that almost like last line of defense, if you like, the RAMs get sent off to the health and safety team or to a manager who review the RAMs and say, yes, this ticks all the boxes that it needs to in terms of quality. That last line of defense, I approve this, it's ready to be now sent off to our clients. We've got the approval process built in there as well. You do also have the ability to duplicate any RAMs documents and then go in and change some of the site specific details. So if you are doing any sort of reactive maintenance or any maintenance works, which is very similar to a previous job, rather than starting from scratch each time, you do have the ability to duplicate that document and then just change the information that you need. Having said that, it's so straightforward to actually create a document from scratch with HandsHQ that I would argue that you'll probably just prefer to actually write a document from scratch each time rather than duplicating an old project. But let's jump into actually generating a RAMs document. So we select new project up on the top right there. And so it's a 4-step process to create our site-specific RAMs. The first step is very straightforward. You're literally going to have these empty boxes to fill in, and this is just filling in our job details. So our project name, reference numbers, you've got a calendar for your start and end date, and then also just your client details, reference numbers, and your locations of work as well. So really straightforward at this point. The next step that we come on to is our risk assessment library. Now, you'll have access to this full library. For our larger customers who need a full bespoke library, then we've got the ability to actually onboard all of your sort of relevant content into the system as well. So we can create a very bespoke view and a very bespoke library based on your sort of works that you do as a business. But essentially what we're asking for at this point is the user to start considering the hazards that are on site. and start to build that risk profile around that project. So we're in the general category at the moment. Scroll down, find a task or hazard that's associated to our job. So let's say arrival and departure from site, for example. We can select this and then go into edit. Behind that title of arrival and departure from site, you'll then have all of your associated risk assessments for that as well. So this is actually where we can go and make this very site specific. So obviously, Steve, you mentioned earlier, and Melanie, I saw your message as well to say that biggest challenge is consistency. This is really where you're going to see that rising consistency and quality of documents, because regardless of your experience level or your knowledge around writing RAMs, everyone's going to start from the exact same starting point. And then it's just down to them to be able to add the site-specific details based on the project that they're working on as well. So we can see here, electric shock from overhead cables. In this case, it's not applicable because actually there aren't any overhead cables on our site. So we can deselect it and it won't show up on our final document. But down below, cross before load, yes, this has the potential to happen. So we can leave it selected. We can then go into edit. And this is where we can go ahead and actually make this site specific. So unloading equipment is a 2-ton pallet on Smith Street. Oh, didn't select that. So we can add in our sort of site specific details here. We've obviously got a task, hazard, 5x5 grid here as well, which we can change if you need to. Got our control measures, residual risk, and then our persons at risk also, which we can change if need be. So this is really how we're going to make that site specific, and really where this is your sort of first step, really where you're going to see that rise in quality, but also consistency of documentation as well. So we can then move back into the library. And then at this point, we're essentially going through and once again, just selecting more tasks that we're going to be doing on site, and then jumping in and changing or updating some of the site specific details. So you can see as we go through just how much content we do have in here. However, you know, if there is anything that's not applicable to you at all, we can take it out. Anything that needs to be in there as part of that onboarding process, we can put it in for you. There is also a feature which will allow you to sort of update and change the library as and when you need to make it bespoke to you. I always say to our customers, your library is never going to be finished. There's always a new risk. There's always a new control measure. So you can always sort of develop that library with the content editing feature. So let's say, so we selected electrical and we're going to say, right, we're going to be installing lighting for our project as well. Any questions about the library? Feel free to fire those over to the Q&A. We can do some questions in a minute as well. But hopefully this is all very straightforward at the moment. So once we've selected the work that we're going to be doing, we can then move through to our next step. This is where we actually come on to our sequence of operations. So our sequence of operations is essentially the way that we would like the team to go about completing that job in the safest possible way. So our safe sequence of works, essentially. Now, it's only going to pull through any relevant selections based on what we've selected in the previous step as well. So you're not going to have a huge library of everything that you need to filter through. What we've selected in the previous step will determine what gets pulled through here. So we're in the electrical. We selected electrical, so we can find our task that we're doing, which is installing lighting. And then this is the sequence that that you would like the team to follow. Once again, you can make this specific to your site by deselecting any of the sequence that isn't applicable. You can drag and drop that sequence around. You can add some information in here as well. So you can free text in the boxes. You do also have the ability to add any images as well. So if you wanted to make a more pictorial sequence, then you can do. This is especially great, you know, if there are any sort of language barriers on site, then you've got the ability to add and make these sequences, make your method statements, make your risk assessments and method statements more pictorial. So if we just move through into our next step, this is where we come to our sort of final step of the process, if you like. This is our sort of main bulk of the method statement. So description of activity, tend to leave this blank just purely because every activity is going to be a little bit different. So you can always fill that in. If you wanted to pre-populate content in there, then you can set that up as standard. And then a lot of this content and information has already been pre-populated for us. All of this information is pre-populated based on those selections from the previous step as well. So everything is always going to be associated to those selections. In the same way that you saw with the sequence operations, you can upload images. So here I've just uploaded an image, which is a screen grab of the closest hospital to where the project's taking place. You can change the size of the image and also add any caption as well. If for whatever reason you would decide, actually, okay, we can take all of this information out because it's not required for our site, then we can just do that. But yeah, it's very straightforward. All that information, once again, is pre-populated for us. Once again, this is where we're going to see that sort of consistency and quality, because each time everyone's using the same information and just adding to it to make it specific to their site. So as we come below, we've got the ability to add any hazardous substances. I'll show you actually how we can create and add a site-specific COSHH assessment to our RAMS document in a moment. And then we have our PPE requirements as well. So we can go ahead and select any of our PPE requirements for our project. So once we've done this and completed our method statement, we can then select save and exit, or just go on to our next step. And believe it or not, that is us done. We've now actually generated our RAMS document. So now there's just a few other sort of bits and pieces to do, adding COSHH, which I'll go on to show you now. I've just seen that we've got a couple of questions come through that I can see. Irina, is there any questions that stick out at all?
Yeah, so there was a question from Melanie, if there is any legislation reference, and if yes, from which country?
Great, thanks, Melanie. So, and thanks, Irina, for that question as well. So I think, yes, there is. So as part of the method statement, there are questions, there are references to legislation in there. The legislation at the moment, I believe, is UK. However, I know it's not necessarily sometimes actually required too much anymore, the legislation. But when you do have a custom library, you do have the ability to be able to add your own sort of legislation based on your country. We can create different divisions within the system, which you can do either like regionally, internationally as well. And each of those, you can update the sort of content and the legislation to match that country. So at the moment, it's UK. However, with the sort of bespoke systems and the more enterprise packages that we have, you've got the ability to sort of change that content and sort of, yeah, map out any sort of countries that you are currently working in.
Yeah, there is
yes.
another one about the whether during the creation process, if the person is able to jump between the risk assessment and method statement. So
Yes.
you can always, yeah, jump between those. Like every time you click on the next, as Mason has just shown, you can always go back and forth, and then you can always go back and edit the project once you have created it. So yeah, it's not a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll show you actually, Richard, how you're able to do this here. So as a bit more of a practical sort of answer to that. So when you've generated your RAMS document and you're at this page, what we like to say about our documents is they're always live documents. So you can jump back into the risk assessment or the method statement at any point. You know, it may be the case that actually on this job that we're working on, the client has now asked us to do another task, and therefore we need to add it into our risk assessment. So what you've got the ability to do is click risk assessment, and it's going to take you straight back to the library, and you can add some more risk assessments to your RAMS document as well. So they're live documents. They're always growing. They can always change. We have some customers that use our system for very small one-day projects, who create a RAMS, do the job, and then they just archive that document and it's gone. We have other customers that create a RAMS document for a 2-year project. So they're always changing and always updating. And one of the great benefits of the system is when you do make a change or an update to a risk assessment and method statement, it's going to ask you actually why you've made the change, what the reason for the edit was. So we can just say updated risk assessment. So what that's going to do is in our activity tab, you can actually see how that document has changed over time. So for this example, this is my Blue Peter moment. You know, I created this one earlier, and all of the changes that we've made throughout this are all now being tracked, and we can see exactly who's changed it, why it's been changed, and what time and when as well. So you can always be able to see the activity log, audit trail. Great for sort of, yeah, document control, best practice, obviously great as well for sort of any ISOs and audits that you may have. Great. So one quick thing to show you as well is being able to add a COSHH assessment. So the way that we would, I'm just going to delete this one and show you how we add a brand new COSHH assessment. So what we have here on the documents tab, obviously we've got our risk assessment, sequence operation and method statement, all which we've generated so far. What we can go ahead and do is just select add COSHH. Now, this is going to take us through to our COSHH library. It's a shared library across all of our larger customers. So what we've got the ability to do here is just search for the substance. We've got about 10,500 substances in here at the moment. It's always growing. If a substance is missing, you send us the SDS sheet and we can update it on the system for you. So we've searched for mastic. We find the right mastic that we're going to be using. We can then go to edit. And once again, the same way with the project details, it's just going to give us a few empty boxes for us to fill in that information. And this is really going to create that sort of site-specific or use-specific COSHH assessment. So what is the quantity that's kept on site? You've got drop-down menus for your length of exposure, frequency, where it's going to be used. And then it's going to pre-populate for us all of our first aid and PPE requirements as well. So we can then select update. This COSHH assessment is now going to be bolted onto the back of our document. So we can move back to our project. And we can now see that COSHH assessment is on the back of our document, which I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. The very last thing to show just before we do have a quick look at what that final document looks like is obviously we've got the approval process up here. So this approval process, which I mentioned earlier, we can almost create that sort of like, approval hierarchy essentially within the system. So we can say, okay, our site manager's created it. Before it goes sent to the client, it must be approved internally by a manager, by a director, or by a health and safety team. So we can essentially just select who needs to approve it, submit that for approval. It's then going to be sent out to the health and safety manager, who can then approve. So they can say, yes, best RAMS ever, hopefully. And then they can just approve. And now that RAMS document has been approved for our groundworks new build and is now ready to be distributed and sent out to our customer. Once that's been sent out, obviously now we need to get these RAMs sent out to our operatives that are actually going out on site to do this work as well. So you've got the ability to do that through the system for a feature which is called digital signatures. What we've got the ability to do is obviously just add a personnel. So let's say if we wanted to add myself, for example, you can add me to the project. We do have another product as well with HandsHQ, which is our training register, something that we're going to be doing a demo on next week. But this is where our training register, so essentially a training matrix, integrates in with our RAMS solution. It's going to tell us whether this individual is actually valid for the project or not. We can see that Alan is valid, but actually myself is added to the bottom. My training status says that I'm missing training. So really, it's just giving us a sort of notification so it shouldn't really be sent to that site. But essentially what we can do is we can get signatures and ask everyone to sign the latest version. That's going to then send an email out to all of our teams that are on this list here. They're going to receive that email, open up that email, sign off on their phone. Alternatively, if they're out on site with a laptop or a tablet, they can find their name, select on that, read the document, accept it, then sign off. And it's actually going to take an image, horrible picture of me there, quite embarrassing really. But you've got the ability to take an image of the person that's signing that document, essentially just doing your due diligence, making sure you're getting the right people sign off on the right documents and mitigating that risk really as much as possible. Great, so let's have a look what that final document actually looks like. So we would just hit preview here and it would generate this document for us. So we'd start off with obviously sort of our main bulk of our sequence operations and our method statement, but obviously you'd have your own logos and business information. As and when you do go through the process of approving documents, your revision number will update itself automatically as well. So as you can see here, we've got our sequence operations, and then we go into our sort of main bulk of the method statement. And as we go through this document, you can see that our images get formatted as well. One thing that I like to say to all of our customers is you'll never have to format a document ever again. You can focus on the important part, which is obviously the content, and then the system will do all the heavy lifting in terms of formatting your images and your text all for you as well. So then as we shoot off the back of the method statement, we come to our risk assessment. So our 5x5 grid gets explained for us, and then our risk assessments are just laid out really quite sort of nicely, easy to read. They flow really nicely as well. So if it is the very first time that someone's ever read a risk assessment and method statement, it's very sort of easy to understand exactly what's going on in this document and what they mean. I've seen so many RAMS documents where it's just thousands of words thrown onto one page in really small little text that there's no wonder why people don't read it. So we just wanted to make them accessible for everyone. And then finally, we can see the signature that gets pulled through here as well. So Alan digitally signed this, and then our COSHH assessment gets bolted onto the back of our document as well. So this is the COSHH assessment, and then below that, you can have the SDS sheet. You can decide whether you want this document on there or not. It's completely up to you. If you don't, if your clients don't require it, then all you need to do is tick a box and it will disappear from the back of your document. Last thing just to show you before we answer a few of your questions is we do have the ability to obviously download. So if you wanted your own version in PDF on your servers, then you can do. We can also email and distribute these documents out straight from the system to our clients. So essentially, it will come from your email address because we're on your account at the moment. You'd be logged in on your account. We can decide who we want to send that to, add our subject and then our body of email, and then we can just forward this straight out to our clients as well. So you've got the ability to have your RAMS document, also your training report as well if you wanted it. The training report is something that I'll look into next week on the webinar next week for the training register. But essentially the training report pulls together all of your personnel that are going to that site. It pulls together all of their training and also evidence as well. So their certificates that you can send over that as well. So you've got your client's got the ability to download that information if they need it as well. But this almost works like WhatsApp. So you're actually able to see when someone's received it and when they've opened it as well. So you always know that and got proof as well that's been sent over to your client and they've not missed it. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for the generation and management of RAMS. Obviously, as I mentioned, we do have other features like the risk register, which is on our sort of more enterprise packages. But this is essentially where you can update and manage all of your content. So if there was a near miss or an incident for slip, trips and falls, you can update the control measure for slip, trips and falls. And that update for that risk assessment will then be pinged out to everyone. They'll always be using the most up-to-date library, but also those who are using old versions of it for live projects will get notified on the system, and they can actually update those as well. And then finally, we have our training register as well, which, as I said, I'll be going into next week. I can see there's a few questions that are coming through. Is there any to answer for the moment at all, Irina?
Yeah, so there is a question from Melanie, whether it's possible to create only a standalone risk assessment and no method statement. Mason, would you like to answer that one? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, there is. So we can create a risk assessment only view where you would be just selecting from the risk assessments and not having any method statement section at all. I appreciate with the method statement that you've just seen, there are quite a few fields and different boxes that are in there. If you wanted to completely streamline that down and only have one box, which is just descriptive activity or emergency procedures, then we can do that. Alternatively, we can get rid of the entire sort of sequence operation and the method statement and purely have a risk assessment only section or way for you to be able to generate your documents. Any other questions at all? I can see that we've got a few in the chat. We've got Scott. If the RAMs are sent to me for approval, could I edit them if needed and return these as approved to the team? Yes, you can. You've got the ability to jump into that document and make the changes, make the updates, approve them, and then send them back to the team as well. So yes, you do have the ability to do that. Cool. I think actually, sorry, I've just realized, Irina, that you've actually answered those on there. But any last questions, then please do let me know. Also, let me know if you'd like for me to follow up. I can, obviously, I'll try and get in touch with everyone over hopefully today, this afternoon, maybe a few tomorrow morning to answer any of your sort of outstanding questions that you may have. But also I'll be able to give you a little indication on price as well and what package I think that you'd best fit into. We have different packages for different sort of features or usage, user numbers, project numbers. So our pricing It's quite varied, but it'd be very bespoke to you as a business and your sort of use case. So I can get in touch with everyone. If you wanted me to call you first in line for a call, then please whack just in the chat, just a hands up, a yes, please, or something, and I can get through to you hopefully this morning or first thing this afternoon. Richard, I've just seen a question. You're assuming that everyone on site has online access. We have a lot of independent subcontractors who attend to site. Is there an additional fee for adding additional team members for digital signatures? So yeah, what we would say is, you can distribute these documents out early. There's the ability for us to be able to add on an empty blank sign-off sheet to the back as well. So if you just wanted to print these off and have everyone sign in manually on site, then you can do that. We've got a lot of use cases actually where businesses or a lot of our customers only want the site managers and the senior people to be digitally sign in, and then everyone else is to sign off manually on site. You can then scan that back in. It's completely up to you of how you want to be able to do that. In terms of additional fee for team members for digital signatures, no, there isn't. The way that the pricing works for users is a user is someone that would actually be generating or updating or changing the document. For those that need to sign off, you can have as many as you like essentially sign off on those RAMS documents. They don't have to be a user of the system. Great. Any last questions? Feel free to pop those through now. We're sort of bang on time, so I appreciate everyone for jumping on today once again. Melanie, thanks for the message. I'll reach out to you this morning to answer a few of your questions that you might have. Anyone else? Any other questions? Feel free to fire those through. Otherwise, I'll give you a call over the next few days, and we'll be able to answer your questions. As I said as well, we are running a webinar next week too, which is on our training register. So if finding a way to track and manage training of your employees a little bit easier rather than using those dreaded Excel spreadsheets and formulas and macros, if that's a bit of a challenge for you, then feel free to join that webinar as well. That's going to be taking place at the exact same time next week, where we'll be able to run through the system and show you exactly how we're making people's lives a lot easier when it comes to training. But yeah, once again, thanks everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it. It's Wednesday. It's lovely weather outside, so I'm sure everyone's got a lot of work to be getting on with before they try and disappear from the office a little bit early to enjoy the sun. So once again, thanks very much for joining, and hopefully I'll see you next week, or I'll speak to you on the phone shortly. Speak soon. Thanks for joining, everyone.